Welcome to the SWIKE podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SWIKE podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier podcast. We're here with one of our new guest hosts, Nahian. How are you doing today?
Good, man. How are you?
Fantastic, as always. And Nahian comes to us with a background in psychology, project management, and a couple of other things along the way. So if you can give us a little bit of what you're up to these days, and we'll kind of rewind back in time and talk about what you were like as a kid. So what are you up to these days?
Yeah, so right now I'm a full-time project manager. So I work for an ed tech company. I'm a non-technical PM, although I have worked on technical projects. And I'm a part-time career coach. So in that, I help people specifically get into project management. So I deal with a lot of transitioning project managers or people who have quite a bit of experience in project management who are looking to elevate their experience in some way. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that project management is generally my MO nowadays.
Sounds good. So we'll get into how you got into project management. But if we rewind, what were you like as a kid? What are some early fond childhood memories back in the day?
Early fond childhood memories. Well, in terms of my characteristics as a kid, like I was curious. And I enjoyed learning, and I can attribute a lot of that to my parents. I enjoyed informing people of the stuff that I learned. I loved educating other people, like my friends. And I think a big part of this actually came from an insecurity that I have. So I have two sisters who are very academically gifted.
Okay.
And I was not as much. And academic like acumen was really appreciated in my family. So it kind of makes you feel a bit off. I've come to terms with that now, but at that time it wasn't as much. And so I would I enjoyed teaching other people. I was kind of an odd child in that front.
And could you tell us a little bit more about kind of that relationship with academics? So were you good at school? So you had two sisters that were obviously great at it. And did you struggle? Were you okay? Or is it just the bar was set so high that it was a little bit challenging?
It fluctuated, honestly. I mean, for most of my life, I was an okay student. So I was like generally B plus, an A student in some parts. High school, I really struggled with, mainly after grade 11. Was a struggle. Thankfully, I was still able to kind of get my grades back up in grade 12, and I was able to get like that A that, my parents were going to hopefully be happy with. But yeah, generally speaking, my relationship with academics was I loved learning. I didn't enjoy the way that I was taught things. And I think that really informed me now as a career coach in terms of how I deliver information to my clients. That I don't just try to lecture. I don't just try to like tell people this is how you have to do things, stuff like that. I really believe in like guiding people to the conclusion as much as possible. Right. And I didn't find that the academic system really like it didn't really work with me in that front. Yeah.
Obviously the current school system is designed for a certain type of person. Some people flourish in that environment. Your two sisters, obviously, and then other people, they might have to find some more compensation, coping mechanisms in order to do that. So
exactly. Yeah.
So you ultimately did a degree in psychology, and what was that decision like, and what are some of the influences that got you there? Because I mean, psychology. Well, I picture in the Asian household may or may not have been well accepted. So what was that journey like?
Yeah, so it's funny. I didn't actually choose psychology really. Like I wasn't really supposed to get into that field. So initially when I was younger, I wanted to become a chemist. And then I moved to chemical engineering because I really enjoyed the idea of building things. I wouldn't say I'm handy at all, but to me, like my young brain assumes that all engineers do is fix things and build things. Sure. And so I like chemistry. I thought engineering would be fun. So I decided to kind of marry the two. And that didn't work out. And right before when I was applying to universities, my hope was actually to get into pharmacy. Largely because my parents wanted me to go to the medical route. I didn't think I would have the grades for medicine nor the interest. But again, I always had this interest in chemistry, and being a pharmacist would kind of play with that. But unfortunately, I didn't have the grades necessary for that. So especially in like my overall grades were okay, but my mathematics was not what was sufficient. And so I ended up in psychology kind of by accident. So I think I told you the story last time as well, but how it happened was essentially I went to University of Waterloo, and I was expecting to get into the University of Waterloo sciences in order for me to become a pharmacist. But I actually got accepted to arts. So I got rejected from science, got rejected to arts, and I didn't want to tell my parents. And they didn't find out until we went to the orientation. And they saw this big banner that said Waterloo Arts. So, my parents were understandably perplexed because they thought I was going to go into sciences and eventually pharmacy. And so, that was a little bit disappointing to them, I imagine. And on the drive back, it was kind of tense in the car. And my dad's like, what are you going to do with your life? And a pamphlet in my hand of the programs. And I looked down and I saw psychology. So I said, I'll just do psychology. So it was really kind of the spur of the moment. But in a weird way, I mean, I don't know, some believes in destiny or whatever. I thought actually it was kind of appropriate because throughout my high school career, I was always helping friends who were like dealing with some sort of trauma or some sort of trial and helping them, like, talk them out of it. And psychology was also a course I took in high school that I really enjoyed. So it was like, it was a very happy find. It ultimately isn't what I wanted to do after I graduated, and I realized, okay, maybe this isn't my field. But when I was studying it, it was, I think I was much more at ease with that decision than had I pursued pharmacy or anything else that I thought I wanted to do. Right.
Sounds good. So it sounds like it was a bit of a happy accident, maybe the universe conspiring to put that pamphlet in your hand as you were having that conversation with your parents.
Yes, exactly.
And I'd love you walk us through a little bit of that journey in university. So, now you're enrolled, you're honest with your parents, I'm doing psychology. Seems like that you were much more at ease. And then like graduation is looming. What was that process like?
To be honest, university for me was about survival. Maybe other people can relate. I didn't really enjoy that either. Again, it comes down to teaching styles, learning styles. Like something I realized after I graduated. So, when I did my master's, so I have a master's in business administration, and I found that process way more relaxed because I did it on my own accord. And that told me a lot about my personality, right? So I didn't really enjoy academics much either in university. I enjoyed psychology more than having to study all these other subjects that I wasn't necessarily interested in. But even then, I didn't necessarily do well all the time. And it was really, it's a 4-year program, and I finished it in 3 years. So to do so, I didn't take any time off. Okay. And so that I think that contributed to me not wanting to pursue psychology beyond that. Because I initially wanted to do a PhD in psychology because I was like, finally, this is in front of me. Maybe this is something I can do for the rest of my life. And then towards the last semester of school, I thought, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm mentally burnt out. I'm like, I'm like, pulling myself to the finish line very slowly. Right. And I think that's kind of, in a way, that was, again, a blessing. And I kind of appreciated going through that because that ended up guiding me to the thing that I enjoy the most now in terms of what I do for my career, which is project management. So,
Yeah, I love if you continue the story where the picture that I have is kind of like that marathon runner who like collapses like just as this finish line is there and is like on their hands and knees trying to reach the end. And obviously you reach the end and then what, right? So you're graduating with a psychology degree. How was like job prospects? How was the conversation with parents? How was that?
It was all terrible. It was like, I was thinking so much about schooling that I didn't really think about what to do afterwards. Right. I did sometimes look into it, but and to anybody else who might be watching studying psychology, it's not the end of the world. But for me at the time, it was just like there was no prospect at all. You look up who's looking for somebody with a psych degree, not a single person. Until you have your master's or PhD, no one's really interested. And so I knew I wasn't really going to be able to pursue psychology beyond the undergraduate level because I didn't have the interest. I didn't know what I really wanted to do. So I had applied for odd jobs and I applied for a job at Staples. I think I may have gotten it, but I went on vacation like right after.
Okay.
So I think I actually lost a job while I was on vacation because they couldn't reach out to me. I didn't have any cell phone service. So yeah, I guess that will forever be a mystery of whether or not I got that job.
Sure.
And yeah, it was just kind of like, it was a real struggle in terms of my parents. Like, my parents are very supportive people, but my father, he's a really big believer in, you have to make your own way.
Mm.
And I think, and again, this is one of those life lessons that I think I appreciated after school, was how hard life can be. And I developed this new appreciation for my parents. And especially like going back to my father, he was saying, okay, well, now you try your hardest to take care of yourself financially, which when you have like no prospects and you're trying to like get a minimum wage job at Staples potentially, it was really tough. It was really tough psychologically. It made me feel insufficient, especially given I had all these friends who studied engineering, being a Waterloo student, who like they went directly into their field right after they graduated because of the co-op system, right? So, I felt insufficient. I felt insecure. There wasn't a ton of prospects, and I was like, okay, like what am I going to do with my life? Like I didn't ask myself that question enough, or maybe I asked it too much. Like up until the last moment of schooling, I thought I was going to pursue psychology until I was like, okay, this actually may not be for me anymore. And that's kind of when I discovered project management, because while I was in school, I worked as I'm not going to call it project management, more like a project lead, project coordinator, or whatever you want to call it, in a research lab, specifically like for psychology. Okay. And having 2 years of experience, that I didn't even think about that, because I was also a researcher as well as somebody leading some of the schedule. And so I was like, I didn't even know about project management as a field. It just, like the true story of what happened was I kind of just Googled the word project and management, thinking, oh, that might be a thing, right? No one's ever really given me no one ever told me that this is a thing. I didn't even know that my aunt, she's been a project manager for like 30 years, and I never knew.
Okay.
Yeah, so I didn't know this was a field. I looked it up and I said, oh, I really like this. Like there's elements that I've already done throughout schooling. So I really enjoy this. And so then I decided to pursue a postgraduate certificate in project management and then gain some more experience so that I can develop myself there. But until that point, when I realized this is what I wanted to do, it was just miserable mentally, and my physical health also declined as well. Right.
Cool. Yeah. So it sounded like the universe conspired again to kind of put this in front of you, obviously after like stamping you down and putting you down a little bit. Yeah. just to make sure that you were sure.
Yes. Yeah. I think I'm glad it happened that way. I think the stamping down gave me an appreciation for so much more. I told my dad this too, like, 2-3 months after like really struggling financially. And I'm it was a source of pride for me as well. I didn't want to ask my parents for help, especially having that conversation with my dad, being like, okay, you have to take care of yourself, or try your best to take care of yourself. And so the universe kind of stamping me down made me appreciate my parents' sacrifice so much more. And it made me appreciate what I have so much more, because you take it for granted. University is challenging, and then life it's a very different challenge. They're both challenging, but life is a very different challenge that, I wasn't prepared for up until that point.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, I mean, in the position that we're in, the fact that we're in Canada, able to even go to university, that sort of thing. Like there's probably billions of people around the world that would kind of kill for that opportunity, right?
100%.
So as much as we're challenged and all that, we do need to be grateful and appreciative of the folks, ideally our parents and those ahead of us that kind of helped us in that. So now that you've kind of been redirected into this new career path, walk us through that process. So now you have this shiny new certificate in project management. Was it easy to land a job? And I saw you have like the HRM and then the MBA along the way. So what was the journey along the way to get to those aspects?
Right. So, I mean, once I got into project management, or once I got a certificate in project management, we're talking about like 2015 around, right? At that time, especially, there was almost, or maybe I just wasn't aware of it, there was very few prospects for somebody without a technical degree. Okay. So if you didn't have engineering or computer science or something, no one was really looking. And so it was really a struggle, and I was trying to think like, how can I make myself stick out? And so, and this is what I tell my clients all the time, is that it's not about the certificate. Even with the PMP, it's really not about the certificate. It's always about the experience. And can you show employers your value? Like, you got to kind of know, like, what is it that you can give them that no one else can, or very few other people can, and how can you prove that you will be the best at what it is that you promise to deliver, right?
Right.
And so me personally, I'm very process minded. I really enjoy process design. I'm a very systematic thinker, and so after getting that certificate, I realized I need more experience. I had my two friends and I, we started a nonprofit, and that, when you start any kind of entrepreneurial endeavor, and I include nonprofits in that, although I guess technically it's not entrepreneurial, but any kind of endeavor on your own, right? A business, organization, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of projects that lead up to the development of some sort of self-operating system, right? And so that was a great experience for me. And I realized that, okay, like, this is, I basically invented my own project for me to gain experience. And then I would talk to other people. So I reached out to different companies on LinkedIn especially, and say, this is who I am. I'm trying to gain more experience in this field. This is my portfolio, basically. Like, this is what I've already done with this nonprofit. And I think that doing something very similar for you would help you with XYZ, right? Like, it might help you with improving the efficiency of your processes or whatever.
Right.
And so thankfully somebody eventually bit. And they wanted to. I was basically a consultant with them for free, pro bono, which I'm more than happy to do to gain experience. Eventually, they did hire me, and like, I didn't continue working for them, but it was still really helpful experience to kind of get idea of what what project management looks like in an applied setting where there are higher stakes. So there's income, there was a salary involved, there was budgets involved, and when you have a nonprofit, there's not as much of these things, right? So, so I gained more experience, and then again, it was still very competitive. It took me a while to gain continuous experience. I was constantly consulting, for the most part pro bono, while I was doing other things. So I had worked in construction, which was also a little bit project management related, but also I mainly it was a bit administrative, and I just kind of kept doing these other things until I can land something. And I wasn't landing anything. So you brought up the human resources, and how that came about was essentially I was continuing to advise but not really get paid for my project management experience. Okay. And so I decided to study human resource management for one of two reasons. So number one was, I did think that human resources would go really well with project management, because there's an element of, you have to manage human resources essentially, in order to, if people get the job done. It's not the project manager. We just facilitate, right? Yeah. So knowing those skills, I thought would be really helpful. But also I thought, okay, if project management doesn't work out because it's been so long and I'm still really struggling to find something, then I can always lean on to human resources. And also I find that there's more parallels between human resources and psychology than there would be project management and psychology. And so I did that. And I was prepared to study, or like, once I finished my graduate certificate in human resource management, I was prepared to work in that field. And so I sent a bunch of resumes, and I worked with a temp agency that was like, oh, no, you're actually better off as a project manager based on your resume. And I'm like, that's what I've been saying all this time. So I'm trying to convince people. And thankfully, I got a contract with the government. Okay. And that basically changed everything. Like, once I worked with the government as a project manager, and proved to them and myself and other people that I can do this job at like pretty much the highest level. Working for a government agency is no small task. Then I can pretty much manage any of the project, right? And that's kind of where I find myself now, that I manage process projects, which is my bread and butter. I've also managed tech projects as well with my current employer. So. Yeah, it was a natural progression of things, or maybe natural. It depends on how you look at it.
It's one of those stories where if you go back and connect the dots, it makes sense. But probably along the journey, I was like, what the heck am I doing?
100%. It requires a lot of patience. And this is what I tell clients as well, is that it's not going to be overnight. But keep on working on yourself.
And what I took from that is, to deal with the challenge of not having experience, you basically created your own projects, created your own not-for-profit in order to do that. And that's obviously for those that are early in their careers or career switching is a great way to create your own portfolio project, or a personal project, and ideally do it with someone else through volunteering or whatever can be a great way. And there's no shame in doing a little bit of pro bono work, right? Now, don't do it for the rest of your life, but obviously a little bit because there's a quote out there where it goes something along the lines of, in life, you get paid in two things, money and experience. Take the experience first and the money will come, right? So sometimes that work experience, free or otherwise, for a couple of months can be one like great learning, right? It's almost like a concentrated course in the School of Hard Knocks. 100%. And then plus it also has a bit of social proof to say, hey, this other company allowed me to do work for them instead of me just creating my own project on its own. And then there's a bit of serendipity that probably happened with kind of the temp agency and kind of bring you back to that. So again, the universe conspiring to push you back into project management or what have you. And then obviously landing that government contract.
Exactly. I think that's a great summary of like what the experience was like, and dealing with that. The underlying feeling during all this is, we've talked about before, was imposter syndrome of, when I'm struggling to find, even when I was getting experience through nonprofit, into construction and all these other things, advising for a tech company, even while I'm doing all that and no one wants to call back and hire me, I thought, okay, like, do I belong in this field? And I think that human resources was also, very serendipitous is a very good word to use. Like it's something that did actually enable me to get my project management job, because the company, so like the agency that hired me, they wanted me for health, safety, and environment, which are health and safety is part of the human resource management, the curriculum. So what made them interested in me was my human resource management certificate, and what like allowed them to what I guess kept their interest was the fact that I have a project management background. So it is very serendipitous. But the entire time, it's just like, do I belong in this space? And chances are you do. If you're somebody who's dealing with that, you don't necessarily know how all the things and all the experiences you have will connect with one another to kind of pave a path that you didn't even consider initially.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about kind of what helped you keep going, because what I heard is, you have supportive parents, but they want you to be self-sufficient, right? So, it sounded like from graduation from psychology, call it 2014, till like landing your job in, what would you say, 2019, 2020? That's a good number.
2019,
to have your full solid role. What were the conversations like? What was the okay, mom and dad, this is my career path? What would you suggest for folks that are kind of in that state?
Oh, that's a good question. My parents to this day don't really understand what I do. so I don't know if that was something that's been addressed. At that time, I think that they were very concerned, and from their perspective, I'm like always struggling. I'm not really landing something per se, but I always stayed busy. I always was working, but it wasn't necessarily in my field. It wasn't always high paying. So I think that, that ate away at them. And, they wanted me to go into the field of medicine, right? So anytime I was even when I was making money, it was like, okay, but you would be living a more comfortable life if you were a doctor, kind of thing, or if you had pursued pharmacy or whatever. The role they played in my life, though, was, I guess despite that, I think them pushing me in that kind of direction was helpful in a sense, right? Because I was kind of swimming against the current, but when you swim against the current, it kind of makes you stronger, right?
Sure.
I learned to be decisive on my own. I learned that like this path is my own, and I'm sure a lot of other people deal with that. And I never listen to your parents or whatever. Of course, I have reverence and respect for my parents. But at the end of the day, when it comes to something like what are you doing for the rest of your life, that is your decision, right? Hopefully it's an honest living and whatnot, but it's you will have to deal with the consequences of that. And I talked to a lot of people who ended up in a field because their parents told them to, and they have no passion for the job. They hate waking up in the morning, but they did it because their parents want them to do it. It's secure. It's, the list goes on of why a parent wants to do it. It's lucrative or whatever.
Sure.
So I learned that swimming against the current and kind of figuring things out on my own, that kind of made me stronger. in terms of what kept me going. My parents did that. My siblings did that as well to some extent. Friends were really helpful. And again, when you're swimming against the current, there's going to always be an element of, can I do this? Again, that theme of imposter syndrome. And having people in my life who saw something in me that I was struggling to see in me, that was really helpful. Especially I have one friend who is also my roommate, and he kind of really helped me, delve more into my faith, but also kind of allowed me to, he gave me some avenues to be gentler with myself, saying, okay, like you're thinking you're worse off than you really are. Right. It's this kind of matter of stepping back, and when it comes to job searching, for example, kind of stepping back and looking at like, how am I organizing this information? Read it. And again, this is something I learned that I teach clients, is that read your resume from the perspective of a recruiter. That's something I wasn't doing, because I was thinking, like, why wouldn't anybody hire me? And then once my friend kind of gave me this realization of, you're looking at yourself from a very particular lens. It's sometimes it can be too good, sometimes it can be too bad, right? Like you have to try to look at yourself more objectively. And so I stepped back and read my resume. I'm like, oh, this is pretty terrible. I'm not telling them anything that they want to know, anything they want to hear. It's very generic stuff, and I tell my clients, you want qualitative results when you're talking about your projects. And my resume is say stuff like, concluded the project on time. Yeah, that's your job. That's what you get paid to do, right?
Sure.
That's like saying I did the job well all the time. Yeah. No one's gonna applaud you for doing a poor job. Right. So friends had a huge role, and I think somebody who unexpectedly had a surprisingly big role in my life was a therapist I once spoke to. In dealing with my constant conflict with myself, my insecurities, I had a therapist specifically who helped me see myself with sympathetic eyes. Mm-hmm. So, all these conflicting feelings of inadequacy, the insecurities I'm dealing with, and then the parts of me that might be a little bit too prideful and saying, okay, like, why wouldn't anybody want to hire me, kind of thing, kind of. He helped me really organize these parts of myself, and try to see myself more objectively, so that once you get out of your own way, it's amazing the things you can do. And I think that, getting that job with the government, that really was like a stepping block, stepping stone for me to get back into the field project management. But it was really learning to getting out of my way that allowed me to do everything else after that. So my current role as a project manager in this tech company, as well as a career coach, I've learned to get out of my own way so that I can help other people, right? Sure. That's a really big lesson that I think I learned through my experiences.
That's awesome. A lot to unpack there. So one of the things about getting out of your own way, one thing that I often tell my clients is their problem is 6 inches big.
Yes.
The problem is those 6 inches are between their ears.
Yes.
Because it's oftentimes, as you said, you're your worst enemy there.
Yeah.
I like what you said about swimming against the current helps making you stronger, and having that support structure of friends and people around you that can motivate you. So oftentimes that is one of the key elements where people around you, relationships, like humans are social beings. So without that structure, it can be so much more challenging. So thankfully, it sounds like that you had family to help you a little bit, but really it's the friends that are there. And then there's no problem in asking for support in terms of things like a therapist and stuff. And I find that that's amazing in this time where people are willing to open up about that. Like in previous years, decades, like nobody could talk about therapists, right? But now it's more like, well, why don't you have a therapist? Like it's like you have a doctor for your physical health.
Yes.
Why don't you have someone for your mental health? We should really all think about doing all that.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it's been a great journey for you, and obviously it's still early on. And then obviously you mentioned a little bit about your MBA, and now with the ed tech that you're doing and the career coaching.
Right.
If you want to summarize a little bit of kind of that journey to where you are now.
So like between like work for government and where I am now.
Yeah, the government, and then like the MBA until up to now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the government was great. I learned a lot. I had a really good mentor, which again is another thing that I think serendipitous or whatever you want to call it. I had the perfect mentor for me. I've had somebody who really wanted to teach me the ropes, but also give me enough autonomy for me to learn on my own. And so yeah, she was fantastic, and I do attribute a lot of my success as a project manager to her, because she made me really rethink how I do things, right? while I was working with the government, I decided to also pursue a master's in business and administration, just because I thought, why not? I thought,
Sure.
well, and again, it comes down to the theme of when you were asking me about my childhood, right? I do love learning, and I think my wife thinks it's kind of pathological in that I never stop. For several years, I don't ever stop taking a course in something or learning something on my own, or like now I teach a lot too. So I'm constantly in that education mode. And I thought, having an MBA, another thing to add, under my belt. It's another thing that can hopefully help me. And again, it did. And again, I think this is what I really want. I hope, viewers see, because I get this a lot of questions of, I studied this. How can this possibly relate to this? I talk to people who are educators with an education degree, and they say, how can I work in project management? You'd be amazed at how, like, the universe is wildly interconnected. And you'd be amazed at how your knowledge in one thing can affect the other thing. And same thing with the master's in business administration. Like, I also employ psychology in what I do now, and human resources in what I do now. But the MBA really helped as well in terms of assessing the feasibility of a project prior to implementation, like looking at it from a cost benefit analysis. I mean, you don't need an MBA to do that, but I think that having that experience as well as having that that education really helps quite a bit. And also, when I was doing my MBA, I was constantly working in groups, right? So again, more experience working with different personalities. I think that's something that people really need to get to gain. Deal with different personalities if you want to be a project manager, because not everybody's going to be on your side, and you have to learn how to manage that, right? And so after my MBA, or while I was doing my MBA, I also switched from the government, which was hard decision to make, but at the time I was living in Ottawa, and we have family back in Toronto, so we wanted to move towards Toronto, which I'm currently located. And so I decided that it's time for me to get a job somewhere else. And so thankfully I reached out to this company, got the job, and yeah, I've been working with them ever since. And the career coaching thing it's a newer endeavor of mine, but it kind of came out of a conversation I had with a friend of, I've had, like, my journey was rough, and I'm grateful for that, because first of all, it gives me more of an appreciation for it, but also it gives me something to help others with. So how can I turn this into something that is accessible to others? And so so that's kind of how I ended up in career coaching while I'm also a project manager. Yeah.
That's awesome. So again, lots to unpack there. What I love is the lifelong learning part. I encourage everyone to be there, not necessarily taking a course or being in school or whatever, but every day, every week, make sure that there's something new that you're picking it up, and proactively doing that, not instead of just waiting. Yeah. And I think turning some of your challenges into something that can help others would be helpful. So in your case, it's the career coaching. For other folks, it could be anything else, because what's the expression? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So hopefully you've gained a lot of strength to help others in that process. And obviously you're still early in your journey. There's a lot more to be seen. I'd love if you have any other SWIKE, the stuff I wish I knew earlier, anything that you want to share with the young Nahians out there that might be curious. I know we talked a little bit about like imposter syndrome, things like that, like trying to deal with supportive or doing what you want against potentially the wishes of your parents. There's a little bit of that. We might do deep dive episodes into any one of those. Sure. But is there any other general SWIKE that you'd want to share and make sure that folks are aware of?
So this is going to sound a little bit like a cop-out, and I know that this is also like a bulk of this is the title of your podcast, right? But I have the mentality of that things will happen to you when it should. So in terms of like stuff I wish I knew earlier, I mean, I can go into a number of things. I can go into, I wish that I knew about project management earlier, or I wish I knew what I wanted to do with the rest of my life earlier in my career. Otherwise, I could have oriented myself towards project management early on or something, right? But I'm also of the belief that things will happen to you when it's meant to happen to you, when you have the mental capacity to do it, right? So had you told me when I was 18 about project management, I probably wouldn't have been interested at all. Sure. Ironic, given that at 18 I was actually working in that field, but it wasn't something that I could mentally grasp. So yeah, I think that not knowing when I did allowed me to find my path when I was supposed to. And I think that's the real lesson that I'd want other aspiring professionals to also take in, whether they're project managers or whoever. I think a lot of us get consumed by this idea of like the what ifs of life, or what if I knew this and that, and what if this had happened earlier in my life or not. I think we overestimate how open we are to take in certain life lessons until options or lack thereof are presented before you. So I if those options were given to me earlier, I probably would have taken them. But it was kind of out of desperation that I pursued the field that I did. It being in that situation kind of forced me to listen. Whereas when I'm so driven, like, I said before, I was considering psychology, and I was willing to steamroll anybody and everybody to pursue psychology until I tripped over my own feet. And I thought, okay, now that I'm on the ground, let's look at this from a different perspective. Is this really for me, right?
Yeah.
That moment was necessary for me to listen to life and then decide what should happen next. So I think the acceptance that I will know things when it is necessary for me to know them is imperative in my life. And it also gives me an opportunity to let go of control. I think that's where a lot of imposter syndrome comes from. And imposter syndrome to me is just an extension of anxiety. And I think anxiety will come from largely a need for control. I mean, it's multifaceted, so I don't want to reduce it to something as small as that. But I think a lot of anxiety comes from this need for control, this need that, like this is my path. This for sure is my path. And then something deviates, and all of a sudden you don't know what to do with yourself anymore. I think having flexibility, being open to new experiences, being open to learning new fields, talking to people and getting an idea of what their life was like, professionally or otherwise. I think that's ultimately the thing that I wish I knew earlier, to ask more questions and gain more perspective on people outside of myself, so that I can understand myself better. Right. Yeah. Other than that, though, I learned everything that I was supposed to when I was supposed to, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think getting to the perspective of like asking more questions or listening to life, I think those are some of the stuff I wish I knew earlier. That's more important. Like knowing about project management or whatever. I think, yes, that would have been interesting. Yeah. But it's not necessarily what the point of that is. I'm reminded of that quote, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, right? Yes. So as you said earlier, if you learned about project management, you wouldn't even have taken it. And I think to myself, like in my early childhood, like if someone taught me about like career coaching and learning psychology and things like that, I probably like forget that. I don't want to have anything to do with it. So you have to go through the journey. I think it's the listening to life, asking for questions, and really taking that perspective to say, okay, what can I do with this? So whatever happened. Now what do I want to do with it? So it's not a matter of like, why did this happen? Why is it happening to me? It's like, well, it happened. Yeah, exactly. So how can I use this and build on it and progress into my career? So I think that's part of the lessons that I'm taking away from what you just said there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds good. And so obviously a lot more to the journey that's upcoming, because there's more in the career coaching, more on the project management side. Right. What are some future endeavors that folks can look forward to hearing from you? And if folks want to reach out and connect, where could they do that? Right.
So I'm available on LinkedIn. So my name is Nahian Alam. I'm sure I'll share this on LinkedIn.
Yeah, we'll link those in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of future aspirations, well, I'm always aiming to kind of scale up, help more people with their transition to project management, or people who are already project managers, trying to help them as well, build my network. And I don't ever want to come off as, I know everything, because I'm still learning too. Even as a coach, I'm still learning how to be a coach, and I'm still learning more about my field every single day from other people. So I always want to do that. A dream of mine has been to write a book, and I was always thinking of like, what can I write a book about? Because project management is a big part of my life, but I don't really want to write about that because it's something that I'm constantly discussing. And so right now I'm writing a book about imposter syndrome. So as you noticed in our conversation, it's a recurrent theme in my life. And when I talk to a lot of clients, it's a recurrent theme in other people's lives as too. Like, especially transitioning project managers, constantly asking like, will I be enough? Will I be able to do this? And the fact is you can, because so many other people have. What makes you different, right? It's just a matter of how you sell yourself. So currently I'm writing a book on imposter syndrome from my experiences and how I dealt with it. And hopefully that will be of benefit to others. I'm really hoping people can gain some lessons there, and also share their experiences, and I can learn from them as well. That's hopefully coming out soon. It's going to be a busy year, but I'm hoping it comes out soon. Yeah.
Sounds good. So we'll definitely share that when it comes out.
Thank you.
And thanks for sharing your story. And hopefully we'll have you back for a future episode.
Yes, this has been great. Thank you for this opportunity. I really enjoyed talking to you about all this, and I appreciate you. So
sounds good. Thanks, Nahian.
You're very welcome.
Take care.
Take care.
Thanks for joining us on the SWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at LukiDanu, LukiDanu, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.